Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the 22nd Annual Family Cafe. You've probably figured out by now that I am Jeremy Countryman, Program Director, and I'm here with Joe McCann.
Good morning, everybody.
How's it going, Joe?
It's going great, man. How are you?
Not too bad.
Yeah.
Hard to believe we are finally at the end of this very lengthy road. 26 live sessions, and this is number 25 right here in the final day of our event. We definitely hope you've been enjoying it. And as we've told you a couple times throughout, we really want to know how you liked it, and you can let us know by filling out a report card, sending it back to us, and you get a free gift. You can do that. It's also going to be available through our Facebook page later, so look for that link to come out this afternoon. So this morning, we're talking to our good friend, Paula Kaiser Burns, and she has a session that's all about getting your materials organized. She's somebody who is with Early Steps and has a lot of experience in organizing your journey all the way from birth to adulthood. I know her son just graduated high school, so she has gone through the whole thing.
Right.
Now, if people want to ask questions, Joe, how do they go about doing that?
Yes, as always, please write them in the comment section on Facebook Live, and we'll be monitoring those, and we will ask those when Paula is done with her presentation.
Right, so please do make sure you share your comments and questions, and of course, any we can't get to during our hour, I'm sure Paula will be there on Facebook in the thread to answer those directly for you. So with that, we're going to go ahead and welcome Paula. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Not too bad.
Great.
Awesome. And the tail end, excited to be on a Friday, right? When it's almost the weekend. Although for us family cafeers, usually the Friday means just the start of all the fun. So
that's right.
Yes. So my presentation today is a theme you're probably familiar with, and we'll go ahead and get started.
To infinity and beyond.
So I'm a big fan of Toy Story movies, and I've been doing this presentation for several years, and last year decided I wanted to spruce it up a little bit. So before we get into the presentation, a little bit about myself. As Jeremy mentioned, I work in the Early Steps program. I am a family resource specialist. And something that's really neat in the state of Florida with our Early Steps program is written into our policy. We're funded under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and written into our policy is for every Early Steps program to have a family resource specialist on staff. And that is that we are the parent or a caregiver of a child that would have been eligible for the program or was eligible for the program. As you all know, IDEA talks about, having a free, appropriate public education that includes related services for the unique needs of every child to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. Now, you all know if you're a parent of a child that's under 3, you're not necessarily thinking about independent living yet, right? But it's important to know, because we are funded under those same guidelines, that when we talk about independent living in the world of birth to 3, we're talking about that least restrictive environment, just like we are for school-age children, but it's translated into the natural environment. So that is, in our program, our goal is to bring the services to the family in their daily activities and routines. So my presentation today is, we've got a couple of objectives that we're definitely going to hit on, and hope that by the end of this session, you guys will be able to better communicate your wants and needs within the Early Steps system. And even if your child isn't in the birth to 3 age, you'll still learn a lot in this presentation, because communication is one of the biggest key factors that we need to do. And then the other part of that factor is getting organized, so that when we are trying to communicate, we have all our ducks in a row, right? So as Jeremy mentioned, I love to get feedback about my presentations. I've been doing these presentations, for many years in Early Steps. I've been working actually in Early Steps for about 12 years, and have done presentation. I think I went to my first family cafe 10 years ago. And I knew the first year I went, I would always want to go back. And so I've been, this has been different this year with the virtual, but we're so glad that you're here. But definitely, if you have questions along the way, please, put them in the comment section, and we will make sure that we get them all answered. I will go review them afterwards if we don't get to them during this hour. So one of the things I have always learned at the Family Cafe, even when I'm there as the professional presenting, is you can always learn something. There's always something you can learn. Don't ever stop learning. So even though Jeremy had mentioned where we are in the journey now. So to take it back to our Toy Story world here, one of the famous lines from Toy Story is when Buzz shows up and he says, "My ship has crash landed here by mistake." And I think as a parent of a child with disability, I can relate to that, because back when Jeremy was first born, I felt like I was on another planet. And thankfully, somebody shared with me a very novel essay called Welcome to Holland. And hopefully you've heard of it if you do have a child with a disability. But for those of you who haven't or don't, I want to share it with you. I'm often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not understood or shared the unique experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks, you make wonderful plans, the Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very, very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands and the flight attendant comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean, Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life, I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of famine and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language. And you'll meet a whole new group of people that you may never have met. It's a different place. It's a slower place than Italy. It's less flashy than Italy, but after you've been there for a while, you catch your breath, you look around, and you begin to notice Holland has windmills, Holland has tulips, and it even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know has been coming and going from Italy. They're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had, and the rest of your life, you'll say, yes, that's where I was supposed to be. That's where I had planned. And the pain of that will never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very significant one. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very lovely things about Holland. Now, you've probably realized, because my voice is crackling a little bit, it's been 18 years, and I still get choked up every time I hear this poem, because as a parent of a child with disabilities, we can relate to that. This was written in 1987 by an author and social activist, Emily Pearl Kingsley. And it really resonates with a lot of parents with children with special needs, because it's a very different journey for all of us. So I hope if you're listening in, and you might know somebody that has a child that has a disability, or has, perhaps been born with a developmental delay that's not yet diagnosed, have some empathy and realize that, they're going through things. It's hard to deal with those things. And it's important to rise up, to connect with other people, and, move on in that journey. So today, in relation to the Toy Story movie, one of the other things that comes to mind is when Buzz Lightyear says, "Sheriff, this is no time to panic." It's another famous line from the movie. And I can't tell you that I didn't panic when my son was first born. But one of the very unique things about our program is we do have a family resource specialist on staff in every area. And as a family resource specialist, we've walked in those shoes. So before I get into the meat of this program, this presentation, I want to share with you my story real briefly. So this is Jeremy. This is my Jeremy. This is actually a picture of Jeremy who, when he was just 1 day old. And yes, I look back at this picture and you guys are probably out there going, "Oh my gosh, he's got a really big head." And he did. It was kind of scary when he was first born. He actually, it was discovered that he had a brain bleed prior to birth. His platelet count when he was born was actually only 7,000. And if you don't know, usually platelet counts for newborns is 100,000. So he was transported to All Children's Hospital in St. Pete, Florida. And I'll never forget, a doctor at the hospital where he was born, first asked us, when they said they came in and they said, "We're going to transport your son," asked us if we wanted to call our pastor. This next slide shows you, and I like to say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So on the left is actually a slice of one of the CAT scans, one of the first CAT scans that Jeremy had. You can see the white areas around in the middle there. That's actually the blood from the brain bleed. And the black areas in that left picture is the fluid that built up because of that brain bleed. So the picture on the right shows that bright white spot there is a device called a shunt. So if you don't know, a shunt is an internal drain that drains fluid, excess fluid from Jeremy's brain down to another part of his body. So you can see here, this is the lower portion with the tubing. I like to refer him to my son as being my bionic man. He actually had 3 brain surgeries before he was 6 months old. But I'm very thankful to say that his shunt has been in and working since 2002. Jeremy has several labels, if you will, several diagnoses of hydrocephalus, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, sensory processing disorder, anxiety, and nonverbal learning disorder. But as many of you know, if you have a child with a disability or if you've worked with children with disabilities, those are all labels that are important because they define the services that he's able to get and the eligibility for the services. But what's more important is that they do not define who he is or what he's capable of. And if you've met Jeremy at the Family Cafe, you would know this. So this is actually a picture of Jeremy. As you can see, he's a big Star Wars fan. This is a very recent picture. He actually did not walk till he was 27 months old. He did not talk or eat solid foods till he was 4.5. So, but this year, he graduates from high school, straight A's from high school. So, and as I mentioned, if you've ever attended the Family Cafe in the last couple of years, you've actually probably seen Jeremy walking around dressed up as Huggles the bear. So he actually came up with the idea of getting a mascot for our local nonprofit group and dressing up as Huggles, partially to kind of overcome some of that sensory processing. But I think the important thing for me as a parent is that Jeremy has taught me so many things. But I think the biggest thing that he's taught me and has helped me to understand is that communication is everything. And not just in the form of him being able to communicate, but actually being able to communicate for his needs and what he deserves. So in communication, the definition is the sharing of ideas, information, thoughts, feelings, and opinions. And we all communicate with each other on a daily basis, in verbally, in writing, through nonverbal communication like body language, our tone of voice, all those things. And to get things that we need for our families and for our children, we've got to communicate effectively. And, you know, we're not all born with those skills. Those skills come with time and practice. And when a child's in the Early Steps program, it's very important for you to be able to communicate with your early intervention team and your service providers. But it's also important, you know, beyond the Early Steps program, once your child has a family support plan or the individual education plan. Sorry, we in Early Steps, we have the IFSP, which is the individual family support plan. Beyond Early Steps, if children are still eligible for services, then they get an individual education plan. So as important as it is to communicate when your child is in Early Steps, it's even more so important to communicate beyond Early Steps. So now, if you can, if you've got a piece of paper or something to write on, go ahead and grab that. And we're going to do a little quick activity just to hopefully work through some little communication things. So, because I don't want you to just sit here and listen to me all day, right? So we're going to do this little activity called Picture This. All right. So the purpose of this activity is to emphasize that it's important to have effective communication. So you're going to draw a picture on that piece of paper that you just pulled out. And I'm going to give you instructions on what to draw. Now, it's important to know you can't ask any questions, and I can only say the instructions once. Okay. So listen. All right. Number 1. On the top of the top right side of the page, draw a triangle. Number 2, to the left of the triangle, draw 2 horizontal lines. Number 3, connect the 2 lines. Number 4, under the lines, draw a large square. Number 5, above the lines, draw a small square. To the right of the square, this is number 6, draw a rectangle. Number 7, now look at your paper and tell me if it looks like this. And you're probably all sitting there shaking your heads because it probably doesn't. So what's important to know is that everybody listening to this presentation heard the same directions, but each person is going to have a different drawing, a different picture from those directions that I gave you. Some of the things that you may have heard and the different of the perception is what's small or large. When I said to like draw a small square or a large square, when I said about drawing the 2 horizontal lines, you didn't necessarily know you had to connect those 2 horizontal lines to that triangle in that roof of the house, right? So everybody heard the same directions, but not everybody is going to get the same results. So there's a lot of things that I could have done to improve the communication in giving those directions to you, like giving you the chance to ask questions, right? Like when I said draw 2 horizontal lines, or are they connected to the triangle? All those things. So it all goes back to that communication. And so many times when we have a breakdown in communication or misunderstandings, it's all because of those barriers that we may or may not realize that we've put out there. So some of those barriers are talking about the different interpretations of what's small and large, words with multiple meanings. If you say, you know, I'm going to, you know, handshake, or, you know, if something's shaking, is it like shaking fast? Is it shaking slow? There's speed. There's so many different interpretations of everything we say. And then even more so in the written word, you don't always hear and see that verbal communication. You don't hear the words. And you don't see that nonverbal communication, right? That we see with the eyes and the mouth and the reassurance. And then sometimes our communication breakdown is just because of our feelings or emotions that we're in at that moment. So a lot of times, we jump to conclusions, we second guess ourselves. Sometimes having a lack of sleep or being preoccupied with something else at that moment when we're hearing those instructions, you might have been, busy. So all of those things are going to make a difference in that, communication. So also, if you're not actively listening, like right now, if you're listening to my presentation, but you're checking your text messages, you're not fully listening to my to what I'm communicating. So all of those things can be barriers to communication. So it's important to recognize and understand those things that could potentially impact our communication. And when we talk about the emotional issues in regards to children with disabilities, many times there's barriers that are built up, like the acceptance of the child's diagnosis. A lot of times people will say, oh, well, that parent's in denial, that parent, doesn't get it. We don't know where the parents are in their journey, in their mindset. So it's important to all realize that, you can't take things personally. If someone is defensive with you, you have to understand that you don't know where they are in that moment in their life. And, they might be just dealing with hearing some news they didn't want to hear. So that doesn't make them a bad person. That doesn't make them a mean parent or, a nasty person. It's just a way that they're hearing it and how they're responding with those emotional things. So, never take anything personally, either as a parent or a provider when you are working with children that have disabilities. And patience. Patience is a big, big thing when we talk about communication. Patience, ignorance, all of those things, lack of information. So hopefully today, some of the ideas I'm going to give you are going to make you think about things. Even if you feel like you're the most organized and the best communicator in the world, maybe it's going to make you think about some things that maybe you can improve upon. So when we also talk about the emotional issues, we talk about the lack of understanding and compassion. That can usually come on the other side, not necessarily the parent's side, but if you're dealing with a provider that may not have had that same experience as you. And sometimes, quite honestly, it comes from other parents because we're all on a different journey with the unique needs of our children. So it's good to understand and accept that not everybody's living in your shoes every day. So they're not always going to understand everything or be as comfortable and have the knowledge about your child's diagnosis. Believe that people don't ask questions to be mean or hurt you. They just want to understand. So brings me to another one of my Toy Story links to this presentation, and that is when Buzz says to Andy, "Excuse me, I think the word you're searching for is Space Ranger." And Andy responds, "The word I'm searching for, I can't say because there are preschool toys present." So this word, this little quote makes me giggle because there's been so many times where I've heard someone say something and I have taken it personally. Thinking back to what I shared with you earlier about the doctor that asked me if I wanted to call my pastor when Jeremy was born. That doctor did not know where I was at or did know whether or not I go to church or, if I have a best friend that's a pastor. Perhaps for that doctor, their best friend is their pastor. And so even though at first I took those words personally, you can't take things personally and dwell on those. Yes, I remember back to that, but what I use that quote now for is a teachable moment, not just for other parents, to not take things personally, but also I share that when I'm teaching my coworkers about working with families and I'm teaching other service providers about working with families. if someone gives you attitude after you've said something, reflect upon yourself with the way you said that, and maybe learn from that, that there might be a better way to say that. And not to say, we have to walk on eggshells, but just have some empathy and care about thinking where that other person might be, and what their shoes are to wear every day. The biggest thing is don't take it personally. So, and then the other part about that, when we are dealing with emotions and communications, is a child will always follow your example, and your example more so than your advice. So I know, because trust me, he repeats things I say. um, my son has watched me. He has watched the way I have handled myself when I've been in heated discussions in his IEP meetings. He has watched myself, or watched me, when he see me, approach somebody to talk about perhaps a challenge that we've had at school. And what I've learned is, well, I can tell you, first of all, I was not always perfect. I'm still not perfect. I've learned from my experiences. I've looked back, I've read some of the emails and things that I wrote back then, and realized, again, I'm not going to criticize myself and, think I'm a bad person because I wrote things that way. But I've definitely found a different way and a more positive way to approach things, to share that communication, to share my thoughts and questions, and when I'm trying to advocate for those services for my child, whether it's in the education world or the medical world. The important things for families to know is, first and foremost, your child. You are the expert on your child. And while there are experts in the medical field, in the education field, and they are all very important in this big puzzle, this big piece of, getting the services and the thoughts and the things you need for your child, you are that one key constant element that knows your child the best. So the reason that IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, has parent and child involvement written in it so many times is because you are part of that team. And whether it's in early steps, whether it's in the school system, or whether it's advocating for your child's medical needs, you are that constant. You're the one that has the game plan for that child, for your child. And you're the one that has all of the information and all the pieces put together. So while someone may have come across perhaps as arrogant or rude, or say something that you might at first take personally, it's important to realize that they may not have known what you've been through. They may not realize something might be taken the wrong way with their saying. So it's important to, not dwell on that. Forgive and forget, move on with those things, and hopefully come to a mutual understanding. So some of the other key things with effective communication are maintaining eye contact, body posture. Right now when I'm talking to you, I have my notes. I have a presentation that I'm trying to follow. And certainly if I sit and I read every single word when I'm looking down here, okay, you're hearing me say the words, but I'm not looking at you anymore. I'm looking down at my notes. So when I glance at my notes and I look at you give this presentation, you are hearing the words, but you're also seeing that I care, right? You're seeing that I care about the way I'm delivering the words to you. So as important as it is for providers to have eye contact with families, it's equal as important for us not to look down, not to look away when we're being delivered news that perhaps we don't want to hear, but be an active listener. It's okay to be disappointed. Maybe it's okay to even, cry and get upset. But, realize that like I did when I was reading the Welcome to Holland poem, you know, I've read that poem for 18 years. It still gets me, right? It still triggers those emotions of having a child with a disability and realizing that I'm on a different journey. But you know what? I would not change the journey for the world. If you've met Jeremy, he's an amazing young man now, not even a child anymore, an amazing man. And he's not only taught me so many things, but every child, every teacher, every provider, every therapist, everybody that's ever worked with Jeremy has gotten something they've learned from him. And having that communication when you're talking, to those providers, and not calling them out, but saying, listen, you said something to me, and by the way, this did happen. That doctor that had said way back, did I want to ask if I wanted to call my pastor when Jeremy was born. We are still in contact and friends at this day, which most people would say, why do you still talk to that lady? But I realized that she was an important part of Jeremy's life. She was an important part of my life with making those decisions early on to send him to a hospital that was a high level NICU that could treat him better. And whether or not she said something that hurt my feelings or made me feel a different way, I have to move past that. And what I have done is use that as a teachable moment, not just for that doctor, but I have the distinct pleasure, and I'm lucky enough to be on many community and family member boards with our local hospitals. So I get to go talk to new residents, right? And that's one of the things I share with those new residents. Again, I use it as a teachable moment. Was it right to say or not say a certain thing? It doesn't matter. We move forward and we realize, that we can, do things better, and we can teach others that they can do things better. And it's all about that empathy. So one of the great tools that we have, actually, that we share with families in early steps, it's called Getting to Know Me. It's a transition booklet that was actually developed and designed by the Florida Transition Project. And once you have this available, this presentation will be available on the Family Cafe's website, along with the handouts. And this will be one of the handouts that you'll receive. And it's called Getting to Know Me. It's a transition book, and it talks about, the child's wants, needs, their favorite things like that. And we encourage families when they're transitioning out of our Early Steps program into services with the school district to fill out this little booklet, in addition to, what you're already is being included on that IEP, that individual education plan. This is a little personalized thing that you can share with that teacher. You can share with the service providers. And, it's just a little bit more personal than perhaps those, mandated pieces of paper, the IEP with all the regulations that we have to follow. So that's one tool that's definitely useful in communication. And when we refer back to, the Toy Story movie again, another quote, "Hey, Buzz, you're flying." That wasn't flying, that was falling with style. So as a parent, we can seek to learn and do the best things with effective communication. But ultimately, we're always going to have mistakes. We're always going to make things and say things that perhaps weren't appropriate. I know I've certainly been there. I've done that. But what I've learned through all of those things, when I had meetings, when I talked to other providers, when I was perhaps talking about a different subject or trying to advocate for something that my child needed that wasn't easy to talk about, I spoke up and got my point across. But then I followed up with that with them with thanking them for what they do, thanking everybody that was there for that meeting. It's okay to be assertive in your communication. It's also more important to be appreciative and let that be seen, because that will go a long, long way. So while you can't go back and change those words that were said in anger, or the things that were, perhaps the words that were wrote in frustration, what you can do is use those things to be a better communicator. So then Buzz said to Andy, I just want you to know that even though you've tried to terminate me, revenge is not an idea we promote on this planet. So that's another one that when I relate that to working with people for getting the services for Jeremy, there's been times where I've been frustrated and we've finally gotten something that he needed. And I felt like there was all this time wasted, and I had, resentment, and I was frustrated and I was angered. But just like, Buzz said to Andy, I know you've tried to terminate me. I mean, there's been times I've wanted to terminate people that haven't perhaps given me what I knew my son needed. But just as in with the communication that we spoke about earlier, it's important that you can't go back in the past. You can't change what you said. But it is important as you go forward, to remember that those are all teachable moments. And as I said earlier, Jeremy has taught many medical professionals, teachers, and therapists so many things that didn't align with their thought and their diagnosis. But they're teachable moments. One of the things I can remember is, when we ended up back in the hospital when Jeremy was a few months older, and he was just mad. Like, he did not want to be there. Even though he was just a baby, he just was just frustrated. He would just cry. And they sent in a music therapist, and the music therapist started playing some classical music, and he just got angrier. Like, he just, it was not what he wanted. And as his parent, I spoke up and I knew that. One of the things that had worked for the time that we were home was there was this marching song called March of the Mods that actually is from my childhood. And it's just like a drum beat song, and very upbeat. Not at all what musical therapists learn in school about calming babies, right? But you know what? For Jeremy, that worked. They actually, at that time, 17, 18 years ago, I had this music on a cassette tape, a cassette player. Most of you young people probably don't even know what that is, but I'm sure Jeremy from the Family Cafe knows, because he's right up there with me. But a cassette tape. So we talked to them and we said, look, we know this, this works, So they got their child life department and they brought in a cassette tape player, and they provided that to us as a family while we were in the hospital. So we had access to play that song that we knew calmed Jeremy down. We don't know why it calmed him down. I mean, I have my theories that I used to play a lot of rap music when I was pregnant with him. So that's my theory. I don't know if it really works, but again, it was a teachable moment to that music therapist, not to say you're wrong, your theory doesn't work, but to say, you know what, not every child is going to react the same way. Every child is different, and they're all going to have unique needs. And even though he has that diagnosis of a cerebral palsy and epilepsy and sensory processing, a loud marching song works for him. And you know what? Listen to mom and dad, because they know that works for him. And they did. And it worked out to be a good thing. So again, that's one of those things I share with residents and other hospital employees when I'm, doing trainings. Every child is different. And when something's not working, listen to those families, listen to those parents. think outside that box, think outside of what you've learned in the books, and, use those real life experiences. So when we talk about effective communication, and specifically when we're talking about assertive communication, we all communicate with telephone, with writing, meeting, all different things. Instead of, getting angry or giving in, here's some suggestions or examples of assertive communication and the way that you can do those. And you will receive all these things in your handouts on the Family Cafe website. So the biggest thing is make sure you target the issues and concerns. So while I could go, into a meeting and talk about all the things in the past, like I have today, that have perhaps triggered some of those anger moments and issues that we've ran into, that is not going to get my point across, because all people are going to sit there, like my son does. He sits there when I start getting rambling on about stuff, and he goes, la, 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 la. Like that's all they're going to hear, right? They're not going to hear what you're trying to get across and your point. So it's important when we're trying to when we're trying to work with people, to target those specific concerns that you have, to be able to communicate. Target those issues. Go in there knowing what you ultimately want to come out of that meeting with. And one of the ways you can do that is with a plan of action. It's not a new term. It's something that, business people have been using for years. We do have a sample plan of action that will be included in the handouts after this presentation. And it's a good way, first and foremost, what is the issue? And you don't even need to wait for the presentation or the special form. You can just write down on a piece of paper, okay, what is the issue? What am I trying to accomplish, right? As I go into this meeting. So whatever that is, write that down. The problem or the issue is A, B, and C. Now, what's leading up to that issue? Write down the things that may have happened, what the issue was that happened. And then, make sure you have, written down or collected, at least in your thoughts, of what things took place and what perhaps you would like the final result to be, right? So when you go in that meeting, you're prepared, right? You have your points ready. You don't get off track and misguided. You're ready to go in and attack. You're ready to go in, not attack, but you're ready to go in and advocate and get what you need, right? So when you're doing that, don't feel like you have to do it alone. There are so many resources, especially now, even more so than 18 years ago. The biggest thing that I relate back to the Toy Story movie again is the important thing is that we stick together, right? Buzz Lightyear said that. So if there's nothing else you take away from this presentation, the next biggest thing I want you to take away is that network with other families. By tuning in today, you're networking with the Family Cafe and all these resources that are available. I know there's been presentations from Fiddlers. Fiddlers also has a parent liaison position like myself in the Early Steps program for school-age children. There's also statewide parent training institutes like the Family Network on Disabilities, where they are there, they are in place, they are funded through IDEA to train and help parents to understand your rights and to understand how to advocate for your children. And there's also local support groups and other parents. So don't feel like you have to do this all alone. Is someone going to go with you and do it for you? No, probably not, right? But that's where it's important for you to learn how to do those things. And by tuning into this presentation, by using some of the resources that are on the Family Cafe's website, if you've never been to the Family Cafe conference in person, Every single program that they have and all their information from past conferences is available on their website. Every year they put together all those questions and answers, and there's a book that they publish and send out to everybody with all those questions and answers. So there's so many resources available, sometimes almost too many resources for families, right? That we get a little bit overwhelmed. But find somebody to, pair with. Find another parent, even if they don't have the child with the same diagnosis as you, even if they don't even have a child with a diagnosis, find somebody to bounce those ideas off of. Talk to your partner, talk to your friend, talk to your sister, talk to your mom or dad. Talk things through as you go through this journey. Don't do it alone. Don't try to do it alone. Just network, network, network. Even though so many families, call me and still, I mean, families that have long graduated out of early steps, they call me and they're running into a challenge, with a school district or something. And they're like, Paula, help, what do I do? And, I mean, I don't have all the answers. First and foremost, I don't know your child personally, right? But what I can tell you is what I've learned as a parent with going through this journey myself and every other parent support person in the state of Florida and beyond. While we might not have all of those answers, what we do have is that personal experience, right? So the other part of that communication is being able to organize your records. And that's a big part of this whole process. So in order to have those answers and to be able to go in feeling like you are together, is you need to organize your records. You have to have good record keeping. You have to have written documentation to support your memory. Now, we all have good memories, right? We think sometimes we do. As we get older, probably we don't. But there's nothing wrong with writing those things down and being able to refer back to them. When Jeremy has medical appointments, when I put that on my calendar, I mean, I used to always carry a notebook with me, right? But now when I go to those appointments, I open up that little calendar date thing on my phone. And as the doctor is telling me things that I need to remember, I type those in the notes section of the calendar. Okay, that's my record keeping electronic way, instead of having that notebook perhaps that I always have to carry around. So it's important to keep those written records, and it also reminds you of the progress you've made, right? Or perhaps those setbacks. And it's important for the whole child and, what you need to know when you're going and getting ready to try to get something you need. So where do you get your information? Where do you store it? So those are a lot of questions that come up. Now, if you haven't figured out yet, I'm referencing everything to Toy Story throughout this presentation. And there's a lot of good quotes in those movies. Most of these ones are actually from the first couple of movies. So Buzz Lightyear says, "Don't talk to me about importance. Because of you, the security of the entire universe is in jeopardy." So the reason I put that quote in here is because I want you to know you have to take on the responsibility of getting organized for your child. Okay. Whether you like it or not, it's your responsibility to do that. Now, are you going to go back to every single record from, the day your child was born and, recollect all those things? Gosh, no, please don't do that. You will spend days and you don't have that time, right? You have a child with special needs, but from this point forward, what can you do to make things better? We all have different ways of organizing things. Some examples are, people just stack and stash stuff in the corner of a room, right? And I can't tell you I didn't do that because I sometimes still do that. And then I get on this this organization kick, and I start hole punching everything and sticking it into, big 3-ring binders. So, having a file. Okay, yeah, I'm going to file this later. I'm going to, file it by category, medical records and education records. Perhaps you have a file cabinet or a mobile notebook file. We all have different ways. The bottom line is you need to figure out what works for you. And even though I'm going to give you these suggestions in this presentation, I'm not you. I don't know what works for you. I don't know what kind of personality you are. Some people would probably say I'm a little OCD with some things, not all things. Some things I just let go. But there's certain things when they're important to me that I don't let go. I hold on to them being a certain way in a certain time, and I don't budge from that. I guess, that stubborn part of me comes through with that. But um, while not beating myself up about being a little stubborn, what I can tell you is being a little stubborn has helped me to be able to not give up and not think that just because my child has cerebral palsy or a sensory processing disorder that we can't go out and enjoy things and do things. We just have to do it a little bit different way, right? So you've got to figure out what works for you based on your personality. I know that our Fiddler's Friends did a presentation earlier on in the Family Cafe that's available on this Facebook page and on their website about True Colors that talks about personalities. And that's a great way, if you don't know what your personality is, it's a great thing to go through and figure out. There's lots of personality tests and things online. Figure out what your communication style is, what your organization style is. It might be a notebook, it might be electronically, but figure out what works for you. There's information that's important to keep, and some stuff that's not important to keep. One of the things that I did find that's also going to be included in my handouts, but you can also go probably Google it right now. There's a sheet called the Emergency Information Form for Children with Special Needs that was actually developed by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And again, this will be available on the website in the handouts. So it's just a summary that I would carry around with me that had all those different things, like the medications, like the dates Jeremy had surgery, the hospitalizations, all those different things. So when I was going to a doctor's appointment, even though you want to hope that their medical record has all those details in it, let's face it, not everybody has time to sit there and review all those things before those appointments. So having that information at your hand in a little notebook, I know there's many apps that are available out there now that do those same things. Some of them are free, some are not. But whatever works for you, whatever's going to make it so that you can keep your stuff organized is the key. And going back, to that Buzz Lightyear reference and the Toy Story reference, Buzz says, "I'm proud of you, cowboy." Parenting a child with unique needs, with a disability, it's hard, right? But you don't have to do it alone. There are so many resources out there. Again, Family Cafe, Family Network and Disabilities. There's so many presentations. There's so many ways to figure out what's going to work for you to get organized. And my closing thoughts, in all of this is to say, whatever you do, be proud of what you do. Don't compare yourselves to another parent. So many times people come to me and they say, "Oh my gosh, you're so organized. Oh, Jeremy's so lucky to have you." Or, people at the school have said, "Oh, if these other if these other children have parents like Jeremy's parent." Well, you know what? We can all play a part in doing what's better for that child, whether you're a parent or, a caregiver or a sister or a sibling or a provider or a teacher or an aide. It doesn't matter, or even a principal. If you see something that you can change to help a child just a little bit more, do it. And if you don't know, network with those other people that know. We all have different ways of communicating. We all have different ways of organizing, and the handouts in this presentation are going to give you some of those ideas and perhaps trigger something to make you think the way that you might be able to make it work for you. One of my last closing quotes that I would love to share with you, if you have not already heard about it, and hopefully you have, is, "If it was not written down, if it was not said, if it was not written down, it did not happen." And that's actually a quote by Pete Wright. who is very well known in the disability world, um, you know, get things written down, get things in writing. You don't have to be combative when you are asking for those things in writing. You can just say, you know what, my personality style is, it's good for me to hear things, but then also to see it. So would you mind giving that to me in writing so that I can understand it a little better? Um, or you can simply say, you know what, my mother-in-law is really kind of pushy, and she always asks me questions and I don't always remember everything that people tell me. So would you mind giving me a copy of that so I can share it with her? Because whatever it works, whatever you need to do to get what you need to be able to move forward and advocate for your child and speak up. And then what's going to happen is your child's going to start watching you and seeing you, and they're going to start advocating for themselves. And I've certainly
To infinity and beyond.
Yep. So to infinity and beyond, because I've certainly seen that happen with my son. And it feels good. It's really good when you see and you hear your child speak up and sometimes repeat those things that you've said to them that you didn't realize they heard, when it comes to getting what they need and really just speaking up for themselves. So I have to show this last slide because because my 18-year-old hates this last slide. But this is actually a picture of Jeremy's little booty when he was a baby, and I always use it on every presentation I do as the ending slide because he's a teenager, right? He's 18, so talking about farts and butts and all those things is reality, right? So, and you've always got to have humor, right? All right, so that's my presentation. I'm done. Do we have any questions, maybe?
Thanks. Yeah, we have a few. We have to wrap up in a minute, but thank you so much, Paula. We really appreciate it. That's the best picture anybody has shown in the entire 2 weeks. I mean, I'm serious.
I think
if Jeremy's awake, he's probably commenting on Facebook right now, right?
Right. What are parents for if not to embarrass you?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And we had one thought wanted to throw out to you, and it's sort of a combination of a few comments, but with all of us having to meet online now with the pandemic and Zoom and other things, how does that impact our communication strategies? It's obviously a little different now. So can you talk about that for just a second? Having to do everything.
Yeah, it's very different. I've been working from home, and we've been, in this remote world since March 18th, right? So we've done many medical appointments with Jeremy, telehealth. That's the new thing, that's all of a sudden, like, it wasn't a thing. And then suddenly 2 months ago, it's a thing. And suddenly it's okay to just, see a picture of your doctor and, talk about things. And so those things have been very different. And I think the important part about it is, especially when you're, dealing with a phone, dealing with a computer, make sure you know where the camera is when you're getting ready to connect. And, when we talk about the importance of eye contact and those things, make sure you're looking at that camera. If you see me right now, like, I'm looking at myself right on the screen. So it appears like I'm not making eye contact with you because I'm looking off screen, or I might be looking over here at my child. Make sure you make that eye contact when you're trying to get your points across, whether it's on an IEP meeting, whether it's with a medical professional. Make the eye contact. Don't be afraid to have a notebook there and, write stuff down, as you're having those meetings. We can't all remember everything, right? It's okay to be human and be able to, let people know, you know what, I'm just going to write this down real quick. Or, do you mind sending that to me in a summary email? People don't know what we need unless we tell them, right? Unless we share that with them. And that's definitely something I think I've learned a lot in this new world. especially on social media. We all love to share things and do things, but they're going to be taken a different way if you don't see that body language and you don't see that, the eye contact and those things. So try to be mindful of that stuff when you are communicating in the electronic world.
Paula, again, thank you so much. That was really informative. We really appreciate it. And thank you.
Thank you for being here. And again, I know that Paula, if you have any questions or comments or things you'd like her to respond to, if you go ahead and put those in the thread on the Facebook video, the comment thread there, I'm sure she'll be able to answer your questions that way if we weren't able to fit them in during our hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to, answer any questions. And even once, the presentation goes up on your website, my email be included. So if there's something, you want clarified more or a resource that I mentioned, definitely I'm happy to help.
Thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Before we put a cap on it for our 11 o'clock hour here in our second to last session in the Virtual Family Cafe, there are a couple of things we want to mention. First of all, thanks to the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, one of our sponsors that is a state agency that has helped us out with the sign language interpretation. And of course, the Department of Education plays a big part in everything that we do. Career Source Florida, Disability Rights Florida, and Sunshine Health, three of our other great sponsors. And of course, Able United, who has some special stuff going on this month that Joe's going to tell us about real quick.
Yeah. So Florida's Qualified Able program is called Able United and allows you to save tax-free without impacting eligibility for public benefits like SSI or Medicaid. Join the thousands of account holders today. Plus, when you enroll by June 30th using promo code FAMILY75, FAMILY 75, you'll receive a $75 contribution and an exclusive prize pack.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And I also want to thank Judith and Brenda for been doing our signing. You guys have been just terrific, and we really appreciate all the hard work.
Yes, they've absolutely done a wonderful job. So don't forget, we have our final keynote coming up at 2 o'clock. It is Keynote Friday, the third of the 3 Keynote Fridays during this event. We're going to be having a conversation with comedian and self-advocate Maysoon Zaid. So we're really looking forward to that. It should be pretty entertaining. We'll see if Joe can keep up with the jokes or not.
I like my chick. We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah.
All right. So please do come back. Join us at 2 o'clock, and we will see you then.
Thanks, everybody. See you too.